So I had an interesting discussion with someone recently about the differences between medical cannabis and street cannabis. It's a topic I thought I knew well, but after I did some digging, I found out I was pretty wrong. From irradiated cannabis to multi-million pound grow farms, let's take a deep dive into the differences between street cannabis versus medical cannabis. But before we get into it, don't forget to click the like button, drop a comment, and if you want to, consider subscribing. It helps me a ton. Thank you. I think the most obvious place to start, and probably the easiest, is the legality. I think it's important to note that when I say street cannabis, I'm referring to any cannabis that is obtained outside the legal medical framework in the UK, meaning that it's basically illegally obtained. No matter your stance on cannabis, whether you think it's great or dangerous, unfortunately it is still a Class B substance under the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971. This means possession can lead to a warning, a fine, or even a prison sentence, depending on the situation, of course. However, on the 1st of November 2018, cannabis was legalized for medical use, which is a huge step forward, but there is a catch. It is only legal with a prescription from a specialist doctor, and most commonly these prescriptions are only available through private clinics, unless you fit one of the NHS's very narrow criteria, such as severe epilepsy or chemotherapy nausea. If you want to find out more about how to get a medical cannabis prescription, I have made a video here, but don't click off of this video just yet. So now we know that one is legal and one is illegal, but most people already knew that. So let's talk about the cultivation and production process. And this is where things get a little bit more difficult. And when we talk about how street cannabis is grown in the UK, it's important to recognize that the street market isn't just one thing, it's a full spectrum. I'm sure there are a lot of viewers that might know someone who grows their own for personal use, with care, attention, and full knowledge of the plant that they're growing. But on the other hand, you have massive multi-million pound commercial setups run by organised groups. And then there's cannabis that's not even grown in the UK, it's smuggled in. But it's important to mention that a large portion of cannabis grown in the UK is grown with two things in mind. That's to be as strong as possible and to grow with as much yield as possible. And the reason is money. Unlike the wide variability you get in street cannabis, medical cannabis is grown under very strict conditions. We're talking precise regulations of lighting, temperature, humidity, ventilation, and there is a lot of street cannabis grown to this level of precision, but all medical cannabis will be grown to this level of precision. In the cultivation process, there's also a very strict sterilization process. Medical cannabis often goes under a process called irradiation, which is wild. We're talking like Bruce Banner, Fallout level of terminology here. This process exposes the cannabis to gamma or beta radiation to kill off mold and bacteria. There are some people who don't like this, and as it compromises the sensory experiences of the cannabis, such as flavor, smell, looks, as it can reduce the terpenes. So you may compromise on flavor, but it means that your cannabis doesn't have any bacteria, mold, or say mushrooms growing out of it. So the next is quality control, and this is another big area that probably springs to mind when you think street cannabis versus medical cannabis. And again, some people are fortunate, they know who grows their cannabis, they trust their dealer, or they have sources and they know exactly what they're getting. But again, there's also a huge part of street cannabis where consumers don't know what they're actually getting, especially if the cannabis is bought online. And I'm sure some of you cannabis connoisseurs have seen it out there. Someone will list something as genuine Cali, and then you see a picture of it and it looks like roast broccoli. You know something's up. And this becomes even more problematic when it's not just flour. Vape cartridges, edibles, oils are all very popular, but it becomes even more difficult to know what's inside, and that's because there's no regulated quality control. Don't get me wrong, I know that there's street cannabis out there that does go under a form of quality control, but there's also a lot that doesn't. And I'm sure you've heard of cases where people buy a cannabis product only for it to be spiked with another substance. Most commonly this is done with spice, but spice isn't actually the formal name of this substance. Spice was just a brand name that just stuck. You would more accurately call it a novel psychoactive substance, and this basically just means a man-made substance. And spice is actually known as a SCRA, or a synthetic cannabinoid receptor agonist. Now, I find novel psychoactive substances very interesting. If you would like me to make a full video on them, I would love to, but let me know in the comments if you do. Anyway, back to the initial point. Sorry, I kind of went off topic there. As there are no standardized health and safety regulations and quality control, there is a lot of street cannabis where you just don't know what you're getting. Now, spiked and laced cannabis is usually by dealers who are just wanting to make a quick buck from vulnerable people, but it's definitely something to be mindful of. And I'm definitely not anti-street cannabis. I have tried a bit of street cannabis in my time, but I do want people to be safe and mindful of these things. And following the same themes of not knowing what you get because there's no quality control, it's almost impossible to tell the exact THC to CBD ratios are in your flower. I know this isn't important to everybody because some people may be like, if it gets me high, that's all that matters. But there are people who do care about this. But medical cannabis is treated like a medicine because it is one. Every batch is tested in a lab, the potency of the THC and CBD is measured precisely, and it's clearly labeled on the packaging so you know exactly what you're getting. Medical cannabis is checked for pesticides, heavy metals, mold, bacteria, and other contaminants. Plus it has to meet the good manufacturing practice standards, as it's about ensuring every product is clean, safe, and consistent from start to finish. So when it comes to quality control, you know exactly what you're getting with medical cannabis. And again, there may be some of you who are fortunate who know your dealer or know your sources and you get a safe, clean product. But then there are a lot of people who just take a gamble. Now, I also want to talk about medical guidance plus self-medication. If you're using street cannabis to medicate, you're essentially doing it alone. And that means you have to figure out what to use, how much to take, how often, what to expect. But this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Some people need that autonomy in their medication. And if it works for you, then it works for you. I often say you know yourself best. But medical cannabis, on the other hand, a trained doctor will be there to guide you through the whole process, to monitor you, to account for any side effects, to change your prescription if things aren't going to plan, and to make sure that everything is going safely. And a topic that I completely overlooked is the sensory experiences. Again, this varies heavily on strain, dealer, where you buy from, everything. But typically, street cannabis tends to be more vibrant, sticky, sometimes even glistening from the trichomes. These are tiny mushroom-shaped glands that produce terpenes and cannabinoids. There is a lot of street cannabis out there that aims to maximize trichome production. Again, depending on producer, street cannabis can be a bit more vibrant, larger buds and nugs, and can come in a wide variety of colors, like purples, oranges. But these visual differences aren't always an indication of high quality or potency. It's just a few things that are quite interesting to note about the uniqueness of street cannabis over medical cannabis. Now, medical cannabis. This is where medical cannabis gets a bad rap. And anybody who's tried medical cannabis or seen medical cannabis, you know that at the moment, things are improving. I will stress that. The buds are much smaller. They're much less sticky. And again, a lot of people say that this is due to the post-harvesting process that is required to meet the pharmaceutical standards. In addition, medical cannabis is dried and cured under very strict conditions, ensuring consistency and safety in each batch. But this can result in a less vibrant appearance. While street cannabis may offer a more sensory-rich experience, medical cannabis will always prioritize safety and consistency. So to wrap things up, street cannabis and medical cannabis may come from the same plant, but they exist in two different worlds. Street cannabis comes with a huge spectrum, so unless you know your dealer or know where it's coming from exactly, it's a bit of a gamble because there is no regulation, testing, or guarantee what's actually in the product. Medical cannabis, on the other hand, is designed for consistency and safety. It's prescribed by doctors, tested in a lab, and produced to a pharmaceutical standard. It's definitely not perfect, but medical cannabis has greatly improved over the 2 years that I've been using it. But at the end of the day, the goal isn't to judge, it's to inform, because the more we understand the differences, the more empowered we are to make the choices that are right for us and our health and well-being. So if this video has helped you or has been mildly interesting, please click that like button. It does help me a ton. And if you want to, feel free to share your own experiences in the comments below. I always enjoy reading everybody's thoughts and opinions on different things, so do make yourself heard in the comments. And again, if you are interested in medical cannabis, how to get a prescription, or more life stories about my experiences with medical cannabis, the good, the bad, and the ugly, do check out my channel. I've got lots of videos that go over various different topics that may be of interest to you. I will also be releasing more content around my ADHD and mental health journey. If that's something that interests you, do consider subscribing. I'm really honored by everybody who's subscribed so far. I really do appreciate everybody. Again, enough of me rambling. A huge thank you once again. Thank you and take care.